Yo, welcome to the Life is Strange Double Exposure Spoiler Cast. Remember, you can get the podcast version of Max Spoilers available by joining our $5 Patreon tier. That's patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. And then you also get a bunch of other stuff with that tier, too. You get the podcast version of The Deepest Dive, MinnMax interviews, commentary tracks, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So check that out if you want more content like this in podcast form. I'm your host, Jen Garcia, and joining me is Patrick Klepek of Remap Radio.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We got our very own Haley McLean.
Thanks for organizing this. I wore a beanie so I could be really
nice.
Early
oh my God.
2010s white girl.
Yes. Oh my God, we should have all. I mean, Patrick, you got the flannel on. I feel like we kind of.
I never left.
Oh man,
I never left.
I'm pretty sure I have a hot dog shirt in my closet if I dig deep enough.
Blessing, which the voice you over there is Blessing Adeoye Jr. from Kind of Funny.
Good day, Janet.
Yeah, I have the Freebird shirt. I like sleep in it pretty often. I should have wore that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Pretend if you're listening to the podcast version, we totally made the assignment.
Just put it on.
We're wearing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
yay.
God. Damn, such a diehard fan. All right, let's just get into it. I want to start with just going around the horn. What is your background in Life is Strange, and what did you generally think of the game? And whoever wants to can kick it off.
I was very curious about this game, Janet, when you talked about it on a recent MinnMax episode, where I believe you said the ending was the biggest L of all time. Not to jump ahead too far, but I was like, I need to finish this game. I was only in chapter 1 at that point. I was like, I am finishing this. You phrased it, everyone wants to see the Titanic sinking, and that was entirely accurate. I needed to finish it. I've played every Life is Strange except for the Captain Spirit spinoff thing. That was the only one.
That one's so good.
Is it good? That's the only one I haven't played.
It's upsetting, but it's
upsetting.
good.
The only thing I know about him is when he showed up in Life is Strange 2 for like a quick sec, and that was also kind of an upsetting moment too. I think Life is Strange 1 is the most nostalgic, but I think I love Life is Strange 2 the most. I loved Life is Strange 2. I thought that was super good. But I mean, we'll get into it, but what a stinker ending. Sheesh Louise. I had to Google what the hell just happened. I had to figure some stuff out. The start of it, I thought, was some of the strongest narrative writing the studio's ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm so also just really excited to have heard your take because Haley has not told me what she thought of this game, which I appreciate. You're like,
I think
just
she
like
just
me,
did.
I finished it. No, yes. But she's like, I finished it. And I was like, oh my God. I was like so excited to come into this show to be like,
I know. I was thinking about
where is
saying,
Haley going to land
right,
on it?
but I was like, I'll save it. So she's excited.
It's funny because it is a little bit of a roll of the dice because the other day I was scrolling through like my Instagram stories, and one of the people I follow who I've like met from like a gaming event had an Instagram story that was like, guys, Life is Strange Double Exposure is like my favorite game of the year. Like it was like them talking. And like, you know, obviously I don't want to hate on anybody that loves a thing, right? Because like we all have different tastes, we all have different opinions, right? But it was one of the ones where I was like, am I in the wrong? Like, am I the person that's crazy here? So yeah, for me, I'll go like my history with Life is Strange. I played 1. I played Before the Storm. I played True Colors. I actually haven't played Life is Strange 2. I really want to play it. I didn't play it, I think, at the time just because the release structure was kind of weird with how they like lined up release dates, or at least like they didn't do a good job of lining up those release dates well. And so I never got around to it. And then also Captain Spirit, I never got around to. And so that's one I really do want to get back to at some point. If I was to say like my favorite Life is Strange, I think it might be True Colors. That's one that I think I've had to sit on for a little bit of like, oh man, I have like the history of, playing the first Life is Strange in like I think I played it in 2016, and like loving Before the Storm as well. But something about True Colors, I think really just works for me, in terms of like the characters and like that, environment, like having it be like that neighborhood setting and everything taking place there, for me just works so well. Life is Strange Double Exposure, I liked a lot until I got about halfway through. And I feel like somewhere in chapters, I would say somewhere in chapter 4, maybe early chapter 4, it felt like there was a turn of, oh, this isn't going the way that like I would have imagined based on the things that you set up here, right? Like I think there's such a strong premise in the first few chapters, and even in chapter 3, there's such a strong thing that's introduced, that's explored a little bit early on in chapter 4, but I feel like isn't explored to the extent that I would have loved to see it go. And then also just I don't know, a lot of loose threads that feel like they don't come back around and actually get tied up neatly whatsoever by the time you finish chapter 5. And so I was pretty let down by the overall package of Life is Strange Double Exposure, but I'm excited to talk about it like more deeply, because I think the most disappointing thing for me with this experience is that I think there's so much potential with it, and it felt like it was just squandered in the second half.
The premise was so cool. I was so invested at the start.
Yeah.
Ugh. Ugh, I say. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very much, and we'll get into this, but it's one where it ends up. I try not to be one of those people where like the ending squanders like everything about the journey. Like you can still look back fondly and enjoy how you got there. And maybe with time and distance, I'll be able to get there with this game to some degree, but so much about how it ends. And specifically the thing I can't get over, the little character card that's the Marvel like thing that happens. And I left such a poor taste in my mouth that I've had trouble getting past all of that and like recentering on the stuff that I did really like in the first half. Like I go, I was reading Kotaku when Life is Strange came out, and I cannot explain why this game captured. I don't think anyone was expecting the original game to capture people's attention in the way that it did. There was just something quirky and interesting and earnest. Like earnest is the term I would use to describe Life is Strange as a series in general. It's earnest, it's melodramatic, it's over the top. There's a kind of CW soap opera quality to it that is just very fun and appealing when done right. And that was like kind of what sucked me in the beginning, despite the fact that I have like I can't stand the Persona games because I don't need a high school drama. And yet one of my favorite games is Life is Strange about this high school drama. And it just really took me in for whatever reason. And I've kind of been along for the ride ever since. I played all of them. Life is Strange 2 is probably my favorite. I think I can point that pretty specifically because by the time 2 comes around, I have kids, and the way that game alongside Captain Spirit talks about sort of like parenting and how challenging it can be to a parent, the fault, like what does it mean to be like a crappy parent, and the eyes. I don't know. There's just a lot of that story that really hit and landed for me. And so and especially after True Colors, which I thought was really strong, having that one central town, I think was a huge part of what made that game. Like a lot of stuff about that game worked, but man, that central town was so fun and interesting to explore. It made it its own character that I was like, you know what? I don't really want to revisit Max and Chloe, but True Colors was so strong. At some point, someone's going to rip the Band-Aid off, so it might as well be this team, having proven they've done something interesting. And the funny part about where this game ends up is that the thing I'm not mad about is the legacy stuff. I'm not particularly upset with them revisiting Max and Chloe. It's more, as was already said, the kind of fumbling the interesting original stuff that was set up here. And that's not where I would have expected to be on a sort of pseudo sequel to the original Life is Strange.
Yeah, I also entered it with really high expectations based off True Colors. I know they did Before the Storm too as well, but I wasn't really a Before the Storm fan. It was like too into the hellinness of Life is Strange. Like it's a little too far. Like the smack talks my power didn't really do much for me. I ended up sticking that one through, but I love the franchise as a whole. Started playing the first one back in 2016. I think what's so fun about that game too is even though it did come out in 2015, when I played it, it felt like I was playing a game from a really long time ago, but in a good way. It has like a baked in nostalgia to it. I think too, it just like, it is a little late in the indie sleaze era, but just then you put on Bright Eyes and you just sit. Like, you ever just think with Bright Eyes in the background? I'm like, yeah, I'm sad.
Like on a bench, with a notebook.
Exactly. It's like, what if you could just stay in time for a little bit? It's like, it's just
a
so
cringy little time
cozy
capsule of what it felt like to be kind of like an early teens person then.
Yeah.
Not
so
romanticized.
I love that game.
We were cringe as hell. We were cute. We were annoying.
Exactly. It's like the Polaroid camera. It's like, the whole, it's so like artsy, art school, like, just the right amount of schlock, I think. And also I think earnestness is a great way to put it, Patrick. Yeah, I love the franchise a lot. True Colors, definitely up there, competitive with favorite next to Captain Spirit's just like a one episode thing, but it's really, really incredible. And I had the famous messed up thought of this team can do no wrong. And then I finished the game and it really did fall apart for me in that back half as well. I've talked about it a lot already, so I won't harp on my overall thoughts too much, but we can finally go into specifics, which is so exciting. But yeah, the review I put on Backlogged of this game was drop off so severe I thought it was at Six Flags Great Adventure, which I enjoyed using my Backlogged as a bit of a meme. But yeah, it was really rough. But it was also rough because it was so high at first. So I think it's going to be really fun to get into it and unpack what was right, what was wrong once you look back on it and you're like, how were these romance options? So let's get into it with chapter 1. Just to refresh people's memories or set the scene, because I know a lot of people, I know a lot of y'all watching or listening out there are kind of toxic. You're like, I just want to hear you tear this game apart because, we have strong opinions on it and I think a lot of expertise. So for people that want a refresher or just, haven't played the game, the setting, it's kind of a late 2023 setting. It's Max Caulfield again, and she is now older, like in her kind of 20s. She is working as a photographer in residence, like an artist in residence at this university called Caledon University. And the game sort of sets up with she has these two friends, Safi and Moses. Everyone's hanging out. It's good times. It's like, I think the setting is like meant to be Vermont. So it's like, it's winter time. It's cozy. Ooh, which mug do you select as you look at the stars? It's got a really nice kind of vibe to it. And then the big traumatic event occurs where Safi is shot, killed, and then you're kind of seeing the grief process of Max. And that's a lot of that first episode, sort of ending with learning that she has this pulse ability and that she can be in alternate timelines. And the end of chapter 1 is her seeing Safi and Safi kind of being like, hey, Max, what's up? And Max is just like so overwhelmed with, oh my God, there's my friend who's like somehow alive in whatever, space and time that I ended up in. So that's really what that first chapter is about. I want to know from y'all, obviously, if there's something that speaks to you just in the chapter, feel free to throw it out. But just starting with Caledon University and this crew and this setting and the exploration of grief, like how do you feel all of those fired on this episode or chapter rather?
I found the location kind of small, and it didn't feel small in chapter 1 because you were still exploring stuff. But by the 5th time later on, I was going up and down the same 2 areas of the admin building. I was kind of like, I'm a little bit feeling like this, especially coming from True Colors, like what y'all were saying, how it really felt like you were in a big town. There's a bunch of different shops you can go into. Then you went into different people's homes. Then you went to this area where there's food trucks out. It felt like you were going to a lot of different places. It really just felt like Max's, I'll give it, really sick artist residence house. Like, holy crap. I wish any university offered housing like that.
The funding was crazy at Caledon.
Oh my God. Like that, her place she lived was really cool. And like they set up the settings well. It just really felt like running down 3 hallways over and over, but I didn't mind it at this point. And also because like, I feel like every major decision is always about like a town getting affected. And here was like just a university getting affected, which I didn't really care that much about the university. I was just like, whatever. A storm might hit it. That wouldn't be the end of the world compared to Arcadia Bay, where I was like, oh my God, no. You know what I mean? I don't know what it was. I just didn't really care that much if this university got nuked or something, so to speak.
Oh, wow. Escalation.
Yeah, I don't know. But it was really pretty.
I think, yeah, and I think for me, like the initial impressions is like so much of what makes a Life is Strange setting work is there's the setting and then the characters fill in so much of that setting that they end up working. It becomes difficult to extract the two. Like, does the reason True Colors as a town work because, dang, it was just such a cool town? Or is it like the characters you're seeing in those shops and the way that's connected into your character and the way you get to explore as a player, like, ends up filling that all together? I think that works. That's a lot of Life is Strange's formula. And for me, like, the school, wasn't doing, again, I had the same vibes, or like, oh, I'm going through the door again. Like, oh, we're going to this area. And then we're coming back. Like, okay, these aren't really standing out. I do like going around this pond, I guess. And here I was holding out a lot of hope for the game because like, well, this would all make sense in an emotional context once I start filling in the surrounding characters, and that'll give these spaces something that means something. Like I remember the first time I don't know if it happens in chapter 1. I think this is chapter 2, but like when you go to like the room with the big telescope and like we're messing with science stuff, like that seems like the kind of room that I thought I was going to revisit multiple times over the course of the game. Like this is a space that's is intimate to one of the central characters of the game. It's one of my best friends. This is a space I'm going to watch change over time. Instead, it's like, whoop, one of the most interesting spaces in the game that uses one of the most interesting explorations of the game mechanics. It's a one and done. You're never going to be back here again. And I found like this game's relationship with space to be pretty wasted. Some of the most interesting spaces were ones you never revisit. Probably the bar is like the most time you get to go back to a same space and feel it change over time with like your relationship with the characters. But early on, I was holding out. But those early couple of sections you explore weren't doing a lot for me.
Did you want to nuke the town?
It wasn't quite there yet. I got it. You know, I was saying.
Just
what if we mentally nuked the university? You know what I mean? Like, would we just mess
we're getting put on a list somewhere because we'll be talking about this so much.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys about the space. That's one of the things I don't think I really thought about deeper until later on in the game, where I think I started to fatigue on it a little bit. Early on, you know, you're still kind of exploring, trying to figure out like, all right, what are we doing here? What are they setting up? Like, what is, you know, starting off at the bar, I thought the bar was going to be one and done. So it was kind of nice to come back and see the same people and, you know, talk to Amanda and like, you know, have that be the thing. But I think coming off of True Colors, I think True Colors set my expectation for space a bit higher, just because I think they use that space really well, right? Like the town is like a small town in Colorado of True Colors felt, you know, no pun intended, like colorful in a way, right? It was beautiful to look at, but then also it being all right, you come out of the bar that you work at / I think live on top of. And now I think about it, I don't even know if you work at it. I think you just live on top of it. But you come out of the bar and like down the street over there is the flower shop. Over to the right is I
remember
like
the park, like just being around the corner. Like I can still remember the space of that game in a way that I've already whooshed out of my mind.
Yeah, like Caledon for me was like kind of whack, honestly, in terms of like I didn't really like walking around the quad. There wasn't really any interesting like visuals there that pulled me in and made me want to like, you know, stop and look at the flowers or anything. Like I can tell you the key spots as far as, you know, that like the hallway inside the building.
That statue that had like the man's face or something.
Yeah. There's the statue outside that like you walk around. There's like the pathway that leads up to where Safi got shot. There's back where Yasmin's office is, and you go out and there's like the little cafe area that has like some more offices. Like it's just not. It wasn't so like as interesting of a space to explore compared to I think previous Life is Strange stuff, especially when I talk about True Colors. But like I think starting off of it, right, like chapter 1 I think was a good introduction to these characters, right? I love the scenario of you sitting with Safi and Safi like asking you to like, you know, or seeing if you want to flirt with Amanda, right? And like that's so Life is Strange in a good way, right? Of course I want to flirt with this girl. Like, are you kidding me? Yes. Like, let's do this. Oh, it's me going around and like trying to figure out different jokes and like, you know, figure out like what's the pickup line, I mean, that's like gonna, you know, pull her in. Yes, this is what I want to do. And I think that leading into the premise of Safi getting shot and like coming after like the rooftop scene, right? Like, I think there's so much promise there and good like beat for beat. Oh, I'm engaged, like I'm interested in what's going on here. And like Safi getting shot I think is Jana, you mentioned like the, you know, exploring grief, right? Like I think it's such a fascinating way to get us back to, all right, we know Max has been here before. We know Max is like, you know, dealt with somebody close to her getting shot and killed. How does she go about it the second time around? And having the episode end with her time powers coming back in like a weird but different way is such a good, oh, all right, we're off to the races. There's something interesting that we're doing here. So I liked where we're at in episode 1.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick baseline question? This was a point of contention over at Remap. What was everyone's decision at the end of the original Life is Strange?
And thus your answer to what happened to Chloe when they ask you in this game.
You might think I would have nuked the town, but I actually saved the town. I saved Arcadia Bay because
another Arcadia Bay truther. Come on down.
So the college off the map hasn't done anything to you. It's chapter 1. Hello, we got a statue, but Arcadia Bay Goodbye.
You're like the opposite of Asher Roth. It's like he just hate college.
I hate college. I hate liberal arts universities.
It's a really specific joke for a really specific slice of it.
I know. I'm sure the Life is Strange fan base within the MinnMax fan base is gonna really enjoy that.
Asleep in the Bread Aisle is a really solid mixtape. Okay,
Oh,
you
dude.
found out here
God.
first.
Let me tell you.
It's
I don't know if you've
so
heard
decent.
Greenhouse Effect, the volume 3.
Yes, I have. I have. And
What's
it's
the
really
latest
good.
one? There's like a new one that came out a couple years
Is
ago.
it 4? Dasher Roth still making music?
No, the third one. Okay, no, I'm talking about the third one. It's really good.
Look, did you kill Chloe or not? Blessing. Let's
Oh
get back.
no. Oh yes, I did. Yes, I did. I saved the Arcadia
Okay.
Bay. I'm big.
Yo, these are okay.
I'm big
Y'all
on
are my
saving
people.
Arcadia Bay.
When I had to admit this on Remap, I got dragged to all hell. They literally said, "Why did you save this racist little town?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa!"
There was a dog
There's some
in
good
it.
people there.
That's literally why I thought. I was like, I don't want that dog I met earlier to die.
The dog's got a chance. He could run.
I don't think so. I don't think he's ready for
But
that.
Patrick, you chose
Yeah.
Bay over Bay, kind of situation. Yeah.
Exact. Well, it fits within the. I think for me, it was like the melodrama, like the soap opera nature of Life is Strange. It was not a calculated, realistic decision. It was, of course, I would let this dinky little town go so that I could be with my love.
Well, then my question for you is, because you're the only one that got this, then what was that conversation like when you said like Chloe lived? Was it just like, yeah, she got sick of me? Like, what did the game say? Because I just put in that she died, and they're like,
Yeah,
that's
the way-
traumatic. Never mind.
Yeah, the way the game sets it up is essentially, like Chloe, essentially like couldn't get over the fact that, in many ways, because Max could just rewind anything that happened, like it made it hard to actually ever move forward. Like it was sort of like this growing distrust between these two characters over these powers. And also, I mean, that's the way it's sort of explained, but like reading between the lines, it's like, y'all, you guys got together in high school. Like those relationships don't like it was a very like sort of natural. It was a whirlwind love, like this very specific moment in time. Obviously, all the supernatural stuff certainly amps up the drama of it all. But it was kind of like they were together. It was really great. And then they just weren't. And they still text. They still kind of stay in touch. And there's a couple of moments that stuff like that happens throughout the course of the story. But otherwise, it's really kind of in the background. They don't foreground it too much. You get it colored in just a little bit, but I think the game understands that, especially given how you can't really satisfy, like the more it drags that stuff in, the more it's going to be more difficult to reconcile and also just tell a story of Max going forward as opposed to Max mulling her past.
Did that piss you off that they're like, save Chloe or the town? You're like, Chloe, and it was like they broke up 1 week later. Like, is that kind of
I've seen the parts of the audience really, and again, this is the problem by like choosing to revisit this story in any capacity without choosing a canonical ending, is that ultimately they couldn't dip their toes too far into it because they're not going to build two games that sort of exist around these storytelling structures.
That'd be
So
lit
for
though,
me,
like
that would be
Pokemon Red and
pretty
Blue, but for like different versions.
Yes.
Like, whoa.
Yes. I mean,
dead
that,
alive.
by the end, I was a little disappointed by the lack of Chloe in my story, and there's some stuff that happens at the end it's essentially like the game going, oh yeah, right. You probably would want to talk to her about everything that happened. Like, maybe I would for this person that I just went through. Like maybe the first person I'd call, no matter how bad the breakup was, like there's another storm. Chloe can and the game never really does anything with that. But I wish they'd been able to, I wish she was present. I wish they'd had an actual conversation that wasn't over text, but the actual arc of what happens to them, like, yeah, high school romances don't last, like typically. It's very typical for it to burn bright, burn hot, and then you move on with your lives and you learn from it. And that makes sense for their story. But I can understand also for fans who have waited 10 years for these characters to return, well, shuffled off screen, like not to talk to one another, is not the most satisfying way to address it.
Yeah.
But then is everyone dating Amanda though, or like where are we at?
Come on.
With that,
Of course.
Is that all?
It's
Yes.
not a choice, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Cool.
No, it's
we can
it's
continue the
That's
call.
like, Haley and Jada, can we talk about the fact that, this guy said high school romances don't last, but like he destroyed a town over a high school romance? Is that not insane? Is that not insane behavior?
Well, just to feel something though, you know what I mean? Like as a treat,
That's a true.
Can you imagine thinking back to like the person you dated in high school and think like, what if you destroyed a town for that person?
Oh my God, that's so
messed
sickening.
Am I obligated? Like what? How long does that hold over me?
You destroyed a town. You nuked a town. It's messed up.
The tornado, or like it's like I feel like Patrick Moore Batman the town. He didn't save the town, but he didn't destroy the town.
He the
It's
railway
kind of a situation.
philosophy experimented the town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those, not culpable, I think before we get into just some of the other choices besides the the Chloe stuff, the Amanda stuff, I do want to bring in this question or comment written in by Flynn in the community, who says, I really enjoyed chatting with Safi and Moses pre-inciting incident, but after the tone, especially the handling of grief, kept giving me whiplash. Moses seemed to be the only character dealing with emotions among a cartoon cast. I was especially disappointed with the depiction of Max. Hannah Tell is great. But the overriding emotion of her delivery feels reliant only on the topic of the moment. Safi related equals sad, otherwise quirky. Whereas in the original game, it felt like Max's genuine care for people could be felt behind every line. Sorry if I sound cynical, the series means a lot to me. How did y'all feel about that aspect of it? I guess it is true, Brit, like this Raiden bringing it up, it is a little bit two-toned, but I think I found the grief stuff to be so like toxically nostalgic, of like looking over the old stuff and kind of mulling over it. Like it felt like I was there with Max, and maybe that distracted from the fact that it is a very like stark contrast in how she is now versus how she was in the first game. But how did that hit for y'all?
Moses was such a pillar of normal dude, like throughout this entire game, to like check in back on, because I find the cringe stuff in these games like endearing. I get that some people it's a turn off, they don't want to play anymore, but I'm like, that's funny. I don't know. I find it weirdly like it's like a little sister talking with her friends or something. You're like, you kids, you crazy kids, and what you talk about. I don't know. That's how I always kind of viewed it. But it was nice having Moses as just like anytime Max would say something like, oh, this is where I die on this bench, or like I don't know, like there was one point something sticking out for me is like near the end where she should be dead, she's like, guess I'm alive. I'm like, why are you joking about this right now? Like she just like thinks things to herself that are so like not cringy but just like not nonsensical, that every time Moses was on screen I'm like, Moses, speak normal and like just talk through the situation like a normal person would. That I appreciated him. And I really liked Safi at the start too. Like the introduction of Safi before she was killed I thought was really, really strong, to the point that when she was killed I actually did care about her, so I could relate a bit to Max more, instead of just like, oh, this new girl that's clearly wanting us to have the same parallel feelings we had for Chloe, but really fast compared to the last game. They pulled it off decently well. Like I did enjoy Safi.
Yeah, I feel like in the immediate aftermath of Safi's death, like I felt some of the grief coming from the characters. I think Max specifically, though, her reaction to it, which I don't know, felt a bit like she was sad, but also like not devastated necessarily, for me, comes from like the fact that she's been here before, like she's done this. And so like, it was interesting reading her texts and seeing like her communication with other people and like how that's like resulted over time, where like if you picked Bay over Bay, right, if you saved Arcadia Bay, there's like text messages from like her parents where she just hasn't responded, which is like, oh, interesting, you are an avoidant person, like you are somebody that doesn't want to like tackle this thing head on, which is like, very interesting for what we know of Max. I think in the immediate aftermath it was interesting like walking around Caledon and like, I don't know, like, peeking into Yasmin's office and Yasmin being like, hey, can you pick a picture for the thing, and like it being it's chill, but also kind of weird. Like, I think death is also awkward in a way, right? Where like nobody knows how to act around each other. And so like I kind of felt that a bit too, like in Caledon, where I'm like, yeah, I'll help pick out a picture of Safi, but also like, you good? Like, should we talk about this? Should we cry over this? Like, should we try and make jokes about this? Like, I don't think I think maybe in the chapters after, definitely it's almost like, all right, yeah, Safi died. Now on to the next thing. But I think in the immediate aftermath, like for me, I felt something there.
I think there's something about like Max's quirky, detached nature that I like. This question makes me think about this in retrospect, that I don't think it quite meets the moment of the seriousness of like what occurs to her. And there could have been something interesting to explore there, where part of the reason, in my playthrough, Chloe and Max end up breaking up is this like detachment from, like, if you had a power, like at one point experience something where reality kind of didn't mean the things that it does to other people, that would have like a profound impact on your ability to like have empathy and like be grounded in reality. And that could have been something interesting to explore with Max as a character, and in some ways would like help interrogate, like, all right, this person is keeping this sort of cringy dad jokes, like ironic, like attitude, like well into her 20s at a pace that like maybe we need to adjust how we're acting now, Max, like whatever age we're at. And the game never really interrogates that part of Max's personality and never really digs into, well, is the reason that she's not having the same level of reaction as everyone else, like, is that because she has these powers? Like, what would that do to a person? And that could have been interesting to explore, but the game mostly uses Max as a vehicle to like have grief, like sort of explored by the other characters. You interrogate other people's grief by asking them questions, but it's pretty rare that Max actually does that to themselves in any sort of meaningful way, other than when you're like on a bench and like having a reflective moment. And I don't know that it quite goes as deep as I would have wanted with that character, given how much the game wants you to be like, these were best friends. It's like, well, I don't know. My best friend was shot in front of me. I think I'd be a little more impacted by this, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do also like what you brought up, Bless. Like, I enjoyed I guess it's still Tuesday. Like, it's like there is a little bit of that, like the grief and the sitting at home, and then they're like, well, I guess I got to go and do these things and kind of be a participant in society. And I think that was like a nice, like, sort of way to be worked through. But yeah, I do think she's kind of someone that you are imposed on to understand the world, like through these other characters.
Yeah, I do think like the Amanda reaction is also interesting, because like, Amanda comes over and she's like, hey, like, let's not date, let's just be friends. And you can tell Max is like bummed out about it, and it's like, Max, somebody died. Like, it's okay. Like,
yeah,
stop being horny for a second.
But now there's like double L's, you know what I mean? It's like, best friend dead.
To some extent, I get, like, I would also be like, damn. Especially if she was a baddie, like, I'd be like, dang, all right, cool, yeah, double L. But
I mean, she brought that like some bread over or something, right? That's something. But it's like, yeah.
But it does feel like, in that way, people around here are almost, a bit more feeling it than the way she is,
Yeah, that I feel like that attachment really like carries throughout, like, and ongoing problems with, I think, her relationships with other people. Before we get into stuff going on in chapter 2, I do want to hit up some of these choices and know what you guys picked. We have finished Loretta's interview or call her bluff was a chapter 1 pick. I called her bluff. I wasn't talking to Loretta. I didn't mess with Loretta for any of this game. I hated Loretta from the jump.
I saw her face and I hated her. She had that face where I was like, ooh, you're a little snot-nosed, little...
Well, like, she's kind of the new Victoria, right? She
is,
like,
kind of, yeah.
Like, that's sort of the stand-in here, is like, in Victoria, like, by the end of Life is Strange, like, you can, like, your relationship with her can go a couple of different ways, and you can end up seeing her as pretty interesting and multidimensional. I'm not sure they really get there with Loretta in this game.
Did you look down to remember her name?
Like, sorta.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird. This game has like a small cast of characters, and yet several of them I feel like I never got to really know.
Yeah.
I was looking at the IMDb like right before this podcast just to get the character names, and I saw Loretta, and I was like, ain't no way there's a character named Loretta in this video game. Like, I started going to Rolodex. I started thinking about, like, I was like, because like the black girl is named Violet, right? Diamond. Yes, Diamond. Wait, is there a Violet in this game?
No. There's an Arcane. Are you watching Arcane right now?
I don't know what I played something or watched something else that has a Violet in it. But yeah, like I thought of her and I was like, her name's not Loretta. When I started going there, I was like, what other character? But yeah, like I called her bluff, and it's similar to Janet, where I'm like, I don't care about Loretta. I don't mess with Loretta. Like Loretta's on site if I see her.
She's a punchable face was my first instinct when I looked at her. And what's also weird is she's your student. I also can't really conceptualize that Max is faculty in this game. That doesn't really.
They don't sell it. They don't sell it.
Max is on some jank faculty stuff because it's like you're kind of like a little too chummy with your students,
like
not like in a romance way, but it's like. But also, it's kind of like they act like they're friends. Like she'll like talk to them and kind of give them advice, or they're like tell her about their personal lives, and it's just like, yo, Max.
She's switching grades. Maybe it's time left, right, and center for people.
Whoa, I didn't switch. I didn't switch any grades. That's you, Haley. That's you. You didn't have to do all that. Oh my god. But yeah, we can continue to get into the drama of that because I also found a lot of that to be a little bit like, this is a little bit strange. It's like, oh yeah, Max, you drinking tonight? It's like, whoa, aren't you like, don't I see you tomorrow? Like at class?
Like I feel like in real life, Loretta would be like, I'm going to record you. And I'd be like, I'm talking to the dean and we might expel you if you keep this up. And she'd be like, oh crap, sorry. And walk. Like, why doesn't she use her authority way more? She's like, oh no. Oh, please don't record me. I'm like, you're literally her teacher. Which is why I feel like she wasn't a teacher this whole game. She just was.
It's something like that is missing from the game. Where like a sequence that plays out where she is an instructor, and you get a sense of why is she here, like working with the students. You know, you could imagine a structure where it's like over the course of several. Like that's one of those places you revisit, right? And you're like, oh, you're working with these students. You get to see the photo assignments they go out and do.
Yeah.
Because so much of the game feels like I know you're telling me she's in her mid-20s. The vibes are I'm 17, and she's written very much like the same. Like so in some ways, I think the game is so deferential to the characterization from the first one, without like being willing to like let this character take a step forward and like project her as an adult and present her in situations like that that I found frustrating over time.
Yeah, it was like the vibes were definitely off.
I googled Life is Strange Violet. There's not even a character in there's not even a character in this franchise named Violet, guys.
No, I don't know.
Which is insane
I think
to
you
think
just
about.
I think you thought like, what is a noun name? And you were, you had part of the formula, but not the other part.
Violet is the most Life is Strange name.
Violet,
like the fact that there's nobody in this franchise named Violet is blowing me away right now.
Well, we know there's going to be another game unless the funding gets cut. So, Violet may return. You don't know.
I'm putting money on the funding getting cut.
Oh, God.
We'll get there. We'll get there in chapter 5.
Okay, so the last question I want to hit up before we go to chapter 2 is the Safi's death question that Yasmin asks. It's the option is like, do you think she took her own life? Yes or no? This I'm just curious about. We don't need to have a full unpacking. I said no.
I said no. And so did 90% of people, apparently.
Yeah. Patrick, are you part of that 10%? Are you out here?
No, which one was it again? Which one was it?
This is Safi's cause of death.
Yeah, when Yasmin was asking, if Safi
do you think she could have killed herself?
Her own life.
Yeah.
Which, who says yes to that?
Oh, yeah, no. There's nothing that sets that up.
I'm not a detective.
There's nothing that sets that up.
I think she more wants to get a sense of her mental state, That's like what she was asking.
But they don't
I feel like more about.
Give us
but like we don't know enough
of any. Yeah, like we had some champagne with her and we looked at a star. And then like, do you think she could kill herself? And I'm like, I don't think so. But, like,
I'm like, honestly, I'm like, are you asking me as the player or Max? Because Max probably knows better than I do. I shouldn't answer this question.
And also, if you look at the data here, like the way these games like should work ideally, the moment you get a 90-10 split, it means it was a bad choice.
Yeah.
Like it means that there was a thumb on the scale, or it was poorly phrased, or you didn't prep the player. Like,
or that
you want
people
these
were
to be
wrong.
like 60-40. Like,
because we got one coming up here that I am dying to. I'm not going to spoil it yet, even though it's a spoiler cast. When we get to it, I'm dying to know what other people picked because it was like not a popular choice at all. And I'm like, really? Like, anyway.
Half these choices are like, did you find this thing in the overworld or did you miss it? Which I didn't really like. Those even
me neither.
It was like,
a lot of them too were like, did you reflect? And I'm like, bro, like what is all these reflection spots?
I know.
Like,
yeah.
I think too, I mean, this isn't exactly by genre a walking sim, but it has like a lot of walking sim elements. And like too often, we talk about this with like Botany Manor. Games love to just put a bench down. And they're like, you can sit and think. And it's like, but also, I'd be sitting on the benches. So I don't know, maybe I'm the problem.
Wow.
I skip those benches. I do sit. I'm not sitting on those.
I do sit. I do sit a good amount of times. If a game has a bench, I do sit on it to see what's up. You know what I mean?
But then it's always just like, waterfalls, what about it? And she's like, oh,
also,
man.
the music I feel like did not eat in this game. I was waiting for a good licensed track, and I know a lot of them probably are licensed, but I didn't get like, I know indie sleaze isn't as pop as it used to be, but y'all could have found. Phoebe Bridgers could have. Maybe she's too expensive. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Ain't no way Phoebe Bridgers is showing up in this thing.
Hey, you don't know what she's willing to do. You don't know what her management is like.
Like, I'm trying to think of like what's the caliber of artists that
they could get.
That they could afford.
I mean, Bright Eyes was pretty big when they got Bright Eyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know.
Salsa says the menu song was the best song, which I probably would agree.
The menu song was pretty good, yeah. But also, was it good or did I just open it a lot? Like, I'm not sure, but I enjoyed it.
They could have got Asher off.
Chapter 2. I kind of think of these two structurally as like chapter 1's kind of the intro and chapter 2 is sort of the supporting cast chapter. This is where you were doing all the travel between the timelines. This is where we find out Safi's car has been vandalized and Max's investigation begins. Sidebar back to what we talked about with Loretta too. One thing I do like about Loretta as a character in this story is I love, and they don't explore this as much as I want them to, which is kind of a theme of this spoiler cast, but I love the potential of opening up like, maybe Max is kind of a bad person because she snoops all the time. Maybe Max is actually just like Loretta. And I love that Loretta says like, you're a snoop too, Max Caulfield. And I was like, oh my God, she is. I was like, playing the game like,
that's so true. What? And what is with everyone in this game? And like, you got me, ask me 5 additional questions. Like as soon as she points out that she found, like she talks to Gwen and she's like, I looked at your emails, and Gwen's like, what do you want to know? It's like, no, like that she would be like, get the hell out of my office.
I just broke into your briefcase and looked at these like separation documents.
Yeah.
Let me explain. Question 1. I'm like,
what's up with this restraining order in this locked briefcase? It's like, how'd you get into my briefcase?
She should be getting slapped in half of these interactions at least. And they're like just opening it up for questioning. The Gwen one, I was like, how is she not? If I got caught, I guess she's faculty. So like, maybe it's just more of like a what the heck
faculty
is wrong
on faculty
with you?
crime. Like it's kind of okay.
Weird.
Like,
but I'd go to the dean in 2 seconds if I found out that I guess there's crimes in her emails. Not crimes, but Yasmin was supporting her. Okay, no. This game's ridiculous. I keep trying to think of a way where it could redeem itself. Like maybe she would have acted that way. And then I'm like, no, she wouldn't have. She should have been pissed and kicked her out of her office in 1 second. Drives me crazy. What was the question, Janet? I just thought of that and it made me pissed off.
No. I was just saying that like this chapter is all about sort of getting to know that cast. So like getting into that too. Like did y'all, with the Lucas having the restraining order against Safi, like what'd you guys do in that situation? Did you delete the photo? Did you send it to Safi? I sent it to Safi because I feel like Lucas was saying, did you delete it?
No, I sent it to Safi.
Wow. Patrick deleted it? Wow.
Yeah.
Now that I would say
That's
this is one of the times where early in this game, I think all the best stuff is a bit front loaded. And these were times where I did, despite the ridiculousness, because Haley, you're totally right. Like it's very much like, well, like this game kind of has like a swiper, no swiping structure with its like interrogation stuff that doesn't feel very realistic. But I do love the dramatic choices. And I felt like the restraining order felt like a great decision because both of them felt kind of slimy in different ways. And it was just like, well, who do I roll the dice on? I also really like that this is the chapter where we sort of start to open up on, okay, like Safi is sort of this like, innocent character that is killed and that's so traumatic, that's so bad. And then chapter 2, you're kind of like, do I even know who Safi is? And I really like that structure that they have going for it in chapter 2.
Yeah, this was I sat with this one for a minute. I went, ooh. But then, I don't know. It's just like, who's this dude? I didn't walk up to Lucas in the quad in chapter 1, which I regretted. So then when I got to when he was giving a speech on her death or something, to confront him.
Me neither. I left him.
Oh, you left? I missed that whole conversation, so maybe I would have felt different going into this, but my gut was like, my best friend and a dude I work with, I was like, I'd probably text my best friend, hey, this all just happened. Maybe not like the picture and I'd delete it in front of him so he'd think I was nice and then immediately text Safi. Like,
I know, we need more like jank options. Yeah. There's no lying in this game, which I feel like was definitely A missing component. That would have been cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, this also had the Gwen flash drive situation. I don't know where people land on that. Do you save the footage or do you stand with Gwen? I saved the footage because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm Detective Max. This is the Detective Max episode where it's like, maybe I can sort of schmatter a solution together and just
saving the footage is also going to be exonerating in some way. I think that's how I thought about it.
I stood with Gwen there. Interesting.
Oh, yeah, I saved the footage because, like, remind me what the footage was of. It was
her dealing the drugs allegedly.
Yeah. So in my mind as a player, I'm like, that's kind of like that's part of the key objective here is to figure out like, all right, what's going on, and like Gwen selling the drugs is one of the weird anomalies that's happening here, and so like I'm here for that footage, and also I believe that's the living world where that's happening.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, oh, the living world's not my timeline, so I'll up here. I don't care.
I will say that's one of they don't do this nearly enough. But I think it happened once with Loretta and once with another character where an event will occur in the other timeline and you can comment about it in the other timeline.
Yeah.
And then the character's like, bro, what the are you talking about? And then you're like you shuffle your feet and you're like, oh, I guess that happened in the other timeline. It's so funny,
dude.
And because you just want to hit I want to hit every conversation option. Bink, bink, just hitting them, and then the game is like dumbass, like that didn't happen here. And I wish they did I wish they actually had things where you could make mistakes by misstating things or doing that's kind of where I thought the gameplay of this was going at some point, was like, I'm going to make real choices in some of these timelines that have big impacts in the other, including in the conversation trees. And there's just not
that
much
felt like
of
such
that.
a big missed opportunity, because I also thought that's what was gonna happen a lot as far
There's
as
a big icon reminding you all the time which timeline you're in, but it actually doesn't matter because the story is just shuffling you forward.
The game is kind of like on autopilot quite a bit and like on rails a bit, even as like for puzzle solving stuff, right? Like I'm never really doing any big brain plays, not like this is that type of genre, but I think they had an opportunity for, oh yeah, I say something, turns out it was a different timeline, and because I said that, it's f***ed now. That I feel like that is sort of one of the pieces of weight they could put on Max's shoulders as far as the amount of power that she has, and like where she knows she's at now with the powers, which is she needs to be responsible, she needs to be careful, like can get really screwy if she's willy-nilly with her powers. And that would have been like a really good opportunity to go, hey, you as a player, like you better be careful, because if you mix things up, guess what, like somebody's gonna catch on, or somebody's gonna like make a bad decision or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Or also using it to your advantage was something I was like hoping would come up more, even if it wasn't like necessarily creating additional like fail states or like branches for the player. But one thing I thought was really cool, I think this was like during my chapter 2 like playthrough, that's when you're like checking out Gwen's office and you're kind of in the cafe like office-y space of the campus. They had like these conversations of like other just random NPC characters talking about things, which I thought were really fun to eavesdrop on. Like there was one where they were talking about thinking that Safi's death was part of like a supernatural occurrence, and it was like 2 guys like conspiracy theory talking about it, and also being like, oh, we shouldn't be talking about this, kind of messed up, but also you think it was like the chupacabra, right? It's like, oh yeah, for sure, and there's like another person talking about their grade, and that's like one of the grades that you have the option to change later, and like those kinds of things I thought would be a little bit more to the forefront, because you do have the ability to kind of like echo into hearing the other timeline when you're in one. And yeah, it wasn't quite as dynamic as I expected. I think, Bless, since you brought up the gameplay, talking about, I believe this is the episode where you have the getting the camera back from where Moses hid it. So like, the other aspect of this is this is all a big murder mystery, right? So like what Max is basically doing in all these moments is like looking into, oh, what's Gwen talking about? Oh, she seems suspicious. What's going on with this guy? And then kind of just like getting caught in all these situations. And one of them is Moses admits to her that it's like, hey, I took Safi's camera from like the murder site, which is definitely like not good and a crime, but I just really want to have that last photo we took. And she has to kind of timeline into the office and then like talk to Moses in one timeline to like get information, go into another timeline to get another object. And there's all these like layers happening with the gameplay, including like at one point a telescope from one timeline appears in another, and what's the cop's name? The cop's name is
Like Alderman.
just Alderman. Just the Alderman. Okay,
That's
Alderman.
his last name.
And
know if
he
he has a
notices
first
it too. Yeah, it's just Mr. Alderman, which is also weird. So it's just a government role, also
Vince.
being an
Vince.
alderman.
Vince
but
Alderman.
Vince. Everyone's sleazy's with a V. That's why you thought there was a Violet. I don't know. There's Vince, there's Vaughn, there's everybody but Violet. But he like notices that, and I think that's also like that was such an exciting setup because so many things were happening at once, and I think it gleamed into mechanics that never quite came to fruition for the rest of the episodes or chapters.
It was the best sequence. It was like, oh yes, this is what these mechanics are for. Like when you turn it blue and you can see him going up the stairs to see your noise thing, so you can go down and in the other reality to get something else. I was like,
so
this
good.
is great. It was the best use of it. And then they really never did it again. There was one time where you listened to Vin talk about he's talking to Diamond about something, I think. That was kind of
when he's trying to find the phone, right?
Yeah,
There's never a sequence where they use the powers to generate actual tension. It's always just to eavesdrop on something or to solve some minor puzzle. But to actually, for a series that otherwise doesn't, there's no combat, there's no, like, it's the closest, and even then, you can always, there's no real fail state, right? It's just a whoop, like, try again. And that's fine. It doesn't have to have a game over in order to have stakes, or like, oh, if you screw it up, the timeline's all messed up and it changes the storyline. I get that's not this type of game, but it just, I think there's a reason that when, like, I played this game at PAX like this year, like, this is the sequence they showed. I think even the team knew the strongest possible, like, 30 minutes we have to show to people is this, and unfortunately ends up being pretty misleading because it is really strong, but it is not representative of the rest of the game.
And like, why not just have more sequences with, it doesn't have to be the exact same thing where find the thing before Alderman, but like Alderman's introduction was really fun because now someone was sniffing stuff out and you were kind of like, uh-oh, because everyone else is sort of like, Max, you're really good at asking questions, and they don't question anything.
And then he's like, Max, you're really good at asking questions, which is like a fun dynamic.
Yeah, it's like, there wasn't a telescope there, explain yourself. And he's not like buying into it. He's like, what happened? Explain. And like he could have been a really fun person to like test if you do remember what timeline you're in, or see, like, he's gonna go explore something and you listen to him in the other thing and maybe he talks to himself and you learn clues that way. I don't know. He could have been something.
Yeah,
and then they just kill him.
Especially because
no, he's worse than that. He doesn't exist.
What even was that?
It doesn't make sense. Also,
I have so many questions about that.
Yeah, they never get around to like, hey, what happened to Alderman? Like, what was up with him having like a weird timeline clone and him touching it, and like, where'd the timeline clone come from? Also, why doesn't his parents like what? Like, there was like a text from Moses because Moses was looking into it, and Moses was like, yeah, there's no record of this guy ever existing. And it's like, I want to know more about why that is.
I think, didn't it say like the mom had a miscarriage or something? Like back in the past?
History essentially bends to justify like him not existing. But then I think Moses has like a follow-up in the text where he's like, this stuff's getting pretty weird. I'm going to stop looking into it. And it's like, what do you mean? Stop looking into it.
I'm like, that's your whole job, is to look into this.
So this is now like melding. This is part of chapter 3. I think like at this point just combine them, because there's like some other stuff that happens at the end of chapter 2. But jumping just for a second into what y'all are talking about, so many things were weird about that. So much stuff back here. In chapter 2, you get what's the kid's name? Her student.
Vin.
No, the guy
Reggie?
who's like awkward. Reggie's like, oh my God, I'm freaking out because I saw a doppelganger of myself. And that's like a plot point that happens in that chapter 2. And then what y'all are talking about in chapter 3 is the alderman, who's very much like, I don't know what's going on, but there's some like weird, something's going on, something's fishy. And he goes up to the murder site and he sees like Moses and Max, and he's like, oh, it's classic. Return to the scene of the crime. It's like, I don't know who killed her, but it was probably Moses. It's like, okay, like that's his vibe. He's just the right amount of toxic. It's like great character to hate. Great antagonist. He sees like a timeline version of himself, because he doesn't just see himself. He sees himself as like a apparition kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was also thrown by like, why can he see that? Because with the thing that happened to Reggie, it's like Reggie's like, I saw him myself, like not like I saw a ghost. So I'm like, why isn't this thing fully formed? And then that brings me to the thing that where I was very split from the statistics on he's getting like caught, he touches it, which I'm like, I don't know why he touches this ghost, but he touches the ghost and he's like, oh my God, like, why is it spicy? You know, he's like burning, melting to this ghost. And he's like yelling and he's like, oh my God, like, you gotta help me, save me. And you have the option to help him or not. What did you guys do?
Oh, I helped him.
Yeah.
I helped him.
Janet didn't help
I
him.
didn't help him. No.
Yeah,
I
can
don't
see it in
blame you
Janet's
for
eyes.
it, honestly. I don't blame you.
Yeah,
for
this
it.
adds up.
No. Yeah, like what?
Do you not feel bad? Because he didn't do anything
He's a
wrong.
cop.
Well, yeah, well, he did
bad?
that. But like, I feel like outside of that, like, what? He's like in the wrong for being on to you. You know what I mean? He saw a telescope like just appear out of nowhere.
You deserve this,
We all know
Max.
that
You
he
are
was guilty.
sus as
We all know he was racially profiling Moses because Moses was suspect number
Oh,
one.
he 1000%
Max was just the white girl hanging out with him. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, look, and you're out here doing, something strange for the ghost change. I don't want to be involved. I'm not gonna touch. What
I got
do I gain from
theories.
touching this guy?
I got theories around.
I mean, I knew I
Alderman.
wouldn't die, but yeah, go ahead.
Like my what's his name? Vince. My Vince Alderman theory is that he is going to be like the ultimate villain of like whatever they're doing. Not to jump forward too much, but like whatever they're doing with Safi and her, pulling together the X-Men or like, I guess the bad X-Men. What's Magneto's crew called? Because pretty sure she's the Magneto in this scenario.
Magneto crew name.
It's like
Googling it.
Brotherhood of Steel or some shit.
Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. This is like such an uninspired name by Magneto.
Brotherhood
Okay.
of Mutants.
Yeah.
Isn't this guy like a genius? Why did he come up with this dry ass name? I'm sure someone in the
I'm
chat
pretty
will be like, he didn't come up with it. It was actually like handed to, I don't know.
Whatever they're doing with Safi in the future, I think he's going to be the ultimate villain, and I think like whatever his thing was seeing his timeline apparition, I think that's just going to lead to some weird superpowers for him. I think he's going to be a supervillain in the future.
I think he has some type of power too. Because why could he see that weird ghost thing? That was a little.
Can he now like
Strange.
apparate in and out of reality or something?
See,
who knows?
the joke that I can't take credit for this is Roger from Kind of Funny that came up with this, but like the fact that he sees himself, like I wonder if there's going to be like a bunch of different versions of Alderman, and then it's going to be like all the men. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh no!
I just
sorry.
didn't really get at the
I'm
end.
scared.
At the end, like just to jump forward, not to talk about it,
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
but just to compare it to now. It's like they jump in the forward. They're like, "Oh, the timelines merge, and we have two memories." I was like, "How come Alderman got Control-Alt-Deleted, and everyone else gets to just merge documents?
Yeah.
Like what? That doesn't really make sense."
No one
You
else
can't pull
touches
him back
the weird
from
ghost.
the brink. And he would have been a better. The fact that I was shocked by the end when I was like going over the characters again. Like, I cannot believe he didn't come back in any
I know.
capacity. Like
Yeah.
he is set up as like a really. There's not much to the character, but he's a good pushback on Max. Like it's a fun antagonist for like this character who is just on to Max's BS in a way that no other character is. And for him to just get zapped out and not come back, like what they try to set up as villains for the second half of the story is like you had one, and
Yeah.
you just got rid of them.
It does feel like, and we'll get into this as we approach like chapter 4 and 5, but it feels like a game where if we think of it as a song, it's like they didn't let enough ideas expand. And then they also just didn't know how to like what the ideas said in conversation with each other, where it's like I feel like this game builds a staircase to nowhere. And that's kind of why it feels so like unsatisfying as experience. It's like, I don't enjoy going up the stairs because I know they don't lead anywhere. So it's like, this would have been great if it went to a spot. But just to wrap up chapter 2 and 3, did you guys clock the twist in chapter 2? Because chapter 2 ends with like,
That was such
I
a
love
good
the ending of
ending.
chapter 2,
Oh.
where it's like you're chilling with Moses, it's all good. It's like, hey man, it sucks that Safi died, but like let's look at these pictures. That's us, that's the crew. And then you hit one more, and it's Max holding the gun. And also back to your point, Haley, of Moses being like the only sane person in this game. I love Moses because Moses was just like, yo, I do not rock with this.
Get
I just
the
left.
hell out of there.
yeah, he's like, I gotta go.
That's exactly
Yeah, but
how
did you guys know?
someone should react at that
Yes.
moment. To be like, oh, bye. Like, was so valid. I was like, I loved him for that. And that was such a good ending. I literally let out like a, whoa, at the end of that verbally, because it was such a, I was so excited for more after seeing that.
Yeah, this is one that I think excited me, but also had me like, ooh, this is gonna be a rough, like this is gonna be a rough one to land. Like a really exciting idea here, but like where are you gonna take this? How are you gonna explain it? Which is so funny because then, again, not to jump too far ahead, but like you get to the end of chapter 3, and I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. Like this is such a genius explanation, and then I feel like they never finished the thread. Like I don't think it. Not to jump too far ahead. Did we ever?
You can go for it.
I'll go for it. Did we ever come back around to this moment of like explaining why Max shot Safi?
Not fully, like because I guess we will get more as detailed as you can get with something that's just very vague. I do think chapter 4 and 5, which we'll go more in depth on in a bit, like is very like. A lot of things were like spinning around in the tornado dreamscape. Like, who's to say? Because it is basically like that. There's a timeline, or at least like an instance where, and you see this happen in the game later, where Safi's like, "Max, just shoot me. Like, my powers are out of control. I'm wilding out. You're gonna have to kill me. Like, I'm gonna kill somebody. You're gonna kill me. Like, someone's gonna, like, it's kind of that escalation. But you don't really, I feel like, I don't think that's I didn't find that to be a satisfying answer, but it just being like an instance where she maybe does it.
I thought for sure, like after the reveal of like, oh, Safi's a shapeshifter. Yeah. For sure, I was like, oh, Safi turned into Max and had to shoot herself to save a timeline.
I thought that too.
Oh my god, that makes so much more sense than what.
Way more cool. Like,
yeah, because like you get to the scene where Max finds a Glock in Lucas's bag or whatever, and then she gives it to Safi.
My favorite Life is Strange sequel: Max finds a Glock.
Max finds a Glock. Max Payne Caulfield. But like, legitimately, I was like, oh, they're setting it up. Like, Safi has the gun, and then like it's gonna get wacky, and when this starts to get wacky, I thought it was going to for sure be a thing of, Safi has to go and stop Safi. And I thought that was going to be like such a good like
that makes
setup.
So much more sense than what we got. But
why don't either of them ask that too? Because they're like, why would you point a gun at me, Max? I'm like, do you forget that you can look just like her sometimes?
Yeah, like maybe you pointed a gun at you.
You did it, and they never think that for 1 second, which was my first thought too.
Which is like a big part of, just getting into wrapping up chapter 3 and going into chapter 4. That's really like when those sequences pop off, where Max comes home, sees somebody that looks like her in her house, chases her down. And that was like
so cool.
So I think too, like this was such a combo, and it was definitely, I was getting a little suspicious because it's like chapter 2, I didn't clock that it would end like that. I was like, wow, this is so cool. I'm like, Max, evil Max, like I'm here for it. And then chapter 3 ending with like Safi's actually been shape-shifting this whole time, and like what seemed like I feel like the obvious answer still would have been fine, but the bleeding timelines, turns out that's actually just Safi. It was like it was a little Scooby-Dooey, but in a good way. I was like, oh man, that like I loved how many times this game had explanations that I didn't see coming at all. And I feel like that was a really cool moment. And I really like that leading into chapter 4, because chapter 4, they also just sit down and talk, and they're like, hey, we're going to figure this out. What's going on? You have powers, I have powers. Let's have a conversation. And I think some people might see that as maybe like a little overly convenient of a structure, but I feel like that's so genuine and real. And it felt so satisfying to like get to sit with the character and feel like you can get answers on some of this stuff.
With the bottle cap scene in front of the
bottle cap is a great conceit of them shuffling that back and forth. I loved that.
Yeah, I was worried that we're only going to get so many questions, but like I was kind of hoping that's what they were doing, because they had like 3 really good banger questions. I was like, ooh, which one should I do first? Because I was almost kind of hoping to get interrupted, and then it matters which one you ask, and then you know that more. But it kind of just keeps circling back that I don't think the choices really do all that much, especially in the later parts, at least. Like even with Alderman, it's like, do you choose to help Alderman or not? It's like, oh, I wonder how this is going to affect it. Oh, he's dead. Like, what I mean? Yeah. It's like, okay, that leads nowhere.
And this is, to Blessing's point about jumping ahead, but like, it's because they're setting up a sequel. You know what I mean? That's like a huge problem. Like, and obviously we'll really unpack this, but like, I think it undercuts the whole story's ability to have more meaningful choices, because it doesn't want to take chess pieces off the board. Yeah. Because like it is a part 1 of a however many part story. Like they may not think of it that way, they're just keeping it open-ended, but you can feel the storytelling getting boxed in, because if in your head like, oh, we're opening the door to a larger world here. Well, they're not just doing that with like other characters that might exist, they're doing that with the characters that you're here with. And as a result, I mean, I don't know that the original Life is Strange has that extreme of an ending if they're thinking they're making a sequel with those characters.
Yeah.
Like part of the magic of that, like the split on that ending, the reason like people, it's fun to yell about it and like get into it is because it feels like, we're just telling this one story. Like just put it all on the table. Because if you thought you were making a Life is Strange universe, I'm sorry, like you don't let anybody kill Chloe. Like the only reason that happens is because you think you're a one and done, and it's better storytelling for it. And I think if this story had had more conviction of being a singular story, you might have had choices that had a more impact as a result.
Yeah, like they needed Safi to be alive at this for set, 2 to get set up. So that immediately,
the fact that this game doesn't end with you saving or killing Safi, is unbelievable to me.
Because the whole time they're mirroring the choice in one, like they're leading you up and being like, this is just like the first one, blah blah blah, and then they're like, but you can't make that choice, and Max Caulfield will return, and then you're like, well, what did I just spend 13 hours doing then?
Yeah. I think too, the game falls victim of like introducing so many. I think the overarching abilities stuff was enticing to check out, but the moment that I'm like, I think we're in the bad place. Like, I don't think it's going to work out is when we do get past that first scene in chapter 4, where it's like, oh, we're talking, we brought back the bottle cap from chapter 1, where it's like, the rule is if you have it, you have to like do whatever the other person says within like some level of reason. It's like, oh, so cute. Like, look at this friend. That was great. And then it gets revealed that, like, okay, Safi has been shape-shifting to sort of get back at all these people that have sort of wronged her in different ways. Like, she set up Gwen to lose her job because Gwen got her book deal ended because the book was about her old friend Maya, who had killed herself because, like, Lucas had stolen her work, and that drove her to suicide. And then it's like, so then she got back on Lucas for this other stuff. It's like, oh, she had turned his kid on him and all this stuff that, like, now the reveal is, okay, I guess Lucas is this big bad guy who like stole his students' work and is profiting off it. He's this great author. And like, that's another, aspect to his character. And he's like kind of a douche or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so this is where we're ending up. But at this point, the game, I don't know how y'all felt about it, but the game had sort of primed me for things are not as they seem. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to find out like that him stealing this work isn't what it looks like. And that we actually made a big mistake in like going to call him out. Because that's what chapter 4 goes into, where it's like, we're going to, at the Krampus holiday party at the bar, it's like, we're going to expose him. It's supposed to be like his roast or whatever. And we're going to just like change the slides and just show that he like stole this work and that he had copies of it that he had found earlier. But I feel like it suddenly funneled the enemy down to 1. And then it didn't actually go anywhere with that either. He kind of just sort of leaves. So where were y'all at with the whole Krampus expose and that aspect?
Yeah, for me, that was a weird one. This goes back to us, I think, talking about Alderman, where getting rid of Alderman, you then ask the question, all right, who's the ultimate bad guy here, right? And I think you could have maybe found an answer to that question. Like, I think it should have been Alderman, but like, if it's not Alderman, all right, I guess we're going to make it Lucas. And I think the problem is that Lucas is a bad guy, but he's not the bad guy of the story. He's a dude that like did a bad thing and like, like stole Maya's work, caused issues for Safi. And like, I understand like, oh, there's a thread here of you need to get this guy back. It's a weird one again for me because I feel like this could have happened at any point as far as like you getting back Lucas. Like this, I feel like she could have, I don't want to say Maya, the homegirl that, Safi, thank you. Safi could have turned into, could have shapeshifted at any time. Like she could have done that in the past. This could have happened in the future. Like there's no time sensitivity on you getting back Lucas that like does have me like, why are we doing this right now? Like, why are we spending our time right now focusing in on this character? And I think part of it is also in the back of my mind. I was kind of like, well, Yasmin is probably the one who's responsible for shit here, right? Like we're going to get to Yasmin in a second, right? Like that felt like so inevitable for the story. And so, yeah, like the whole, we're going to be in one timeline. Moses is going to be in the other timeline, like, telling us how to sabotage the projector thing. That whole sequence just felt weird and unnecessary to me. Yeah, it was a weird one.
Why didn't they just shapeshift into Lucas and make a video and post it on social media of him admitting that he did it? That would have been probably a lot easier.
Here's a follow-up question also is, what is up with her powers, with Safi's powers, just in the sense of...
Oh, yeah, you had asked me about this off.
Because like I think they imply in the game that she doesn't physically shapeshift. What she does is manipulate people's brain to see somebody else. And if that's the case, do cameras work on that? Like, can you record a video? But
That's
also,
the part that threw me.
But also they must,
camera
right?
button.
Because they got video
Yes.
of the teacher.
Gwen.
Of Gwen.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how any of this works.
And then they
it feels
also-
like
Yes.
it needs more explanation.
They also say like she leaves a little part of herself in them when she shifts or something. But it's like, how is she doing that if all she's doing is manipulating other people's brains to see her as you? None of it makes sense.
None of it, and like a lot of it, honestly, is solved if you just allow her to shapeshift like a regular.
Yeah, just let her shape.
Yeah, I feel like they introduced that
Let my girl
for
shapeshift.
no reason other than I guess to get to where they wanted to go with chapter 5, which was like the big task that you have, and like look, and this.
None of it makes sense.
This is where it all goes down.
Were you
is the
guys just
thing,
like,
because-
what's going on? Because I literally didn't know what was happening. I was just like, rush Safi. Like, I just, like, when I was making decisions, because I didn't know what was happening.
Oh yeah, there's like so many things that happen at once. There's, also something that really frustrates the hell out of me is with the Lucas thing where, you expose him and people generally believe you. They're like, yeah, you stole this work. This guy sucks. Boo, we hate you. He's like, you have no idea what you've done. But that's not true. And I know it's like, oh, maybe he's just a bad guy who's just going to like talk smack. But he runs away and then you like go after him and you never really see him again. It's Safi, pulling a gun on her mom being like, you did this, like you're the only reason I got into school. Like, I don't know what her beef really is. It's like her stopping her book or whatever. And then Max kind of tries to stop it. But in being set with the choice, but it's also, it's not a choice is the thing. It just plays out on screen where it's like she decides she doesn't want to kill Safi. So they're like, what if we just run into the tornado storm? And in doing that, you enter like a psychological mist.
What did she,
in which
how did
people
she know to do that? She's like, we'll do this. And also the storm was on a
just
cliff.
vibes.
She like walked off a cliff into the storm. I'm like, did they fall?
Well,
Is it?
There's something similar that happens in the original Life is Strange, right? There's a whole like
The dream
during the
sequence.
storm sequence at the end of the first game, there's like revisiting moments of like what's happened over the course of the episode. So I think it's an attempt to gesture at that, even though I do think it falls into the trappings of like at some point you got to start explaining a little bit of how this like works a little, like why are we doing this?
Yeah, I think it gets caught like chasing the first game in like set pieces and motifs, because even just the aspect of Maya's suicide, it's like, okay, someone has to get killed and then someone commits suicide. It's like, okay, like you don't need to do that. And you've done stories where you don't necessarily do that stuff, and it felt like they felt the need to mechanically call back things. But yeah, chapter 5 is basically the worlds have collided. There is a fun kind of visual moment where early on in that chapter, everyone starts like saying the same thing in unison, and that's like kind of freaky, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? And then the living and dead timelines combine, but you're also sort of going through a mind meld across 4 and 5 of seeing things from the first game, but then also this game, and then your mechanical task is to go to like each person and like get Safi out of them by taking a double exposure Polaroid photo of them.
Wow.
So
deep. That's so deep.
Yeah. And everyone knows this is going on also, which is interesting. And then the thing there's a lot of things to talk about here because we're now at the end of the game. We can just fully get into it. The thing for me that also is wild is just that everyone knows what happened. They have both memories somehow.
Yeah.
And so the game ends with Max just at the bar with like 8 supporting characters being like, yup, I have powers. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, we gotta get out of here before the Central Bureau of Control comes in here and says this is going to be like an event. Like they're gonna lock this place down.
She'd be arrested with her brain dissected in 20 minutes if this was real. Like,
I would love that crossover of the Federal Bureau of Control coming over to Life is Strange.
Honestly, someone should be investigating this.
Yeah. The bar sequence was crazy. No matter, because I went and saw, like, if you say yes to Safi, if you say no to Safi, and if it changes the vibes. Nope, she just goes to the bar. She's like, hey, fellas, I have something to tell you. Sit down. And it's like, what? Why are you acting like this is so chill right now?
And the question, as a reminder for people, is it's like, so, everything kind of cools out. It's like the timelines have melded. I've gotten you out of people's bodies, even though you'd never were in their bodies. Don't worry about that part. And Safi's just like, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go find other people like us.
She's Nick Fury. She's the Nick Fury of Life is Strange.
And then she asks, like, if you will agree to help, like, later or refuse also later, which is just, like, very weird to ask, like, such a not in the now kind of question. Like, if I come back, are you down for me? And I'm like, nah, or yes. And either way, she's leaving. So it really is just, like, a lot of nothing. Later, Moses asked about it, too. And he's like, hey, like, pretty crazy with Safi. And then you can say, like, she's justified or that, like, you'll be here if she comes back or whatever. But it very much gives, which is such a dated reference because people don't watch Simpsons anymore because people aren't 30 plus necessarily. But when they write off Poochie and they say Poochie's gone to another planet, that's what I feel like they did with Safi. Like, Safi's just kind of walking away off screen.
But then this extra little scene shows her the exact same location where you last saw her talking to Diamond. So it's like they just didn't feel like animating a different location for like 1 second to take me out of that thought. No, that was dumb.
Safi's like, I forgot my phone actually, and I see Diamond with like a nosebleed. Yeah, you were gonna say Bless.
And that's what I was gonna say is like you see Diamond with the nosebleed, and you're like, oh, superpowers, that must be it. And it's like, I don't know, man, maybe the air is dry. Maybe she has a deviated septum. Like, have you thought about that?
There was a big storm and people experienced like a psychological event where their brains were rattled across dimensions. A lot of reasons to have blood running
I'm like,
down.
if nosebleeds mean superpowers, guess what, guys? I'm Thanos. Because my nose bleeds like crazy all the time.
So the three of you, save Arcadia Bay. Is there a sequence when you're talking to Moses where the game tries to sort of bring some resolution like to that during that? Because there's something that comes up about Chloe in mine. I was curious what.
Yeah, I think it mentions something like I fear saying this because I might be incorrect, but I think it mentions something like maybe it's time for me to go back to Arcadia Bay.
Okay,
like at some
right.
visit,
Okay, so
like,
I get a version of that in mind. That's like, so are you ready to start talking about that blue-haired girl that was in your life? And she's like, yeah, I think I am. And I was like, boo.
Interesting.
Boo.
That's weird. Because like,
that's so weird.
I was thinking, like, I wonder what ending of the first game they would prefer you have done for like the emotional beats they then lay out in this game. Because I kind of felt like I was almost kind of happy that I saved the town because there was a lot of parallels to I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to do the same thing again sort of energy. And then like having lost Chloe, it made her more like, it made more sense that maybe she was a bit more jokey / like using humor for a grief mechanism with Safi being dead that I could lean into and sort of like excuse, even though it was kind of annoying as instead of this is her first time a close friend has died like that, So I was like, it kind of felt like the Save Arcadia Bay ending makes the most sense given how she wrote this game.
They should have picked one. Ultimately, I think they should have picked one because it forces them, it prevents them from truly engaging with, like, you cannot fully weave it as a source of emotional resonance and like lack of resolution with Max because there's just not the production budget to make these in parallel. So it has to sort of exist on the periphery and it's brought up on the margins. But this would be whichever way the first game ends for you, that's the defining event of your life, probably for your entire life. And like, how would it not be controlling and central and how you react to every other major trauma going forward? But this game can't do that because I understand why they don't pick an ending. But ultimately, if you were going to do this, I think you should have picked one. Like, just take it on the, like, know that you're going to make a bunch of people angry. But I think they end up in this very wishy-washy space where it's like, well, where they end in my version of the story is, so is Chloe going to be a main character, like, in the next game? Like, no, they're not going to do that because they can't, like, they're not going to build Chloe as a sidekick that would come in, because it would kind of make sense, like, I'm going to go get the band back together. Yeah. Like, Chloe's going to come help me go after Safi. But they're not going to do that because it wouldn't make sense to build the game in that way. So it ends up leaving me feel really unsatisfied.
What if? Because like in the ending of the game, obviously, like the storm comes back and like Max kind of perseveres through the storm, right? This time around, it kind of sees it through. And like, you know, the timelines merge and fix and all that stuff. I do wonder if they could use that as an excuse to be like, oh, Chloe's alive now. Like Chloe's back to being alive because guess what? We defeated the storm. And so in merging timelines, somehow you found a timeline in which Chloe is still alive. I'm scared they might.
You know what?
I hate that, I think.
I
hate it too.
But also it's kind of weird that when she discovers the multiple timelines in your version of the story, does she ever ask, I wonder if Chloe is here?
No. I don't think
she
so.
never
But
does.
she should.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
That'd be the first thing I would think of.
Oh,
if-
yeah. Okay. It took me a second to like really process what you had asked. I was like, what, when I'm walking in that weird hotel room and looking for something and everything's black and white? I was like, oh, no. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. So, yeah, geez, that would make so much more sense than what we did.
Well, I looked up because there was comic books that came out in between these games, and I haven't read them, but I looked at the plot because I was curious. And in those comic books, they went canon Chloe lives ending, and they explored it from there, and apparently barely touched Chloe, and they broke up like or something really quick anyway. So who cares? But it'd be kind of cool if like the comics were the Chloe lives canon ending, and like this was the Chloe died canon ending, and like they existed in two types of media and
Right.
kind of like remedy
Right.
with it. And then did what Blessing's saying and like combined the swirls, and now she's alive so that they don't have to worry about like making a game.
But your
with her
ending
in
is
it.
still true. You made that choice. And then
Yeah.
supernatural mumbo jumbo like gets
just
you
were
down.
Somehow
different,
Chloe's returned. I mean, it's just
Man,
timeline.
that would have been. I like that so much better as a way of trying to resolve the tension between
Yeah.
that first game's ending.
Yeah. But like, it's just the weird thing of, I think you have to be really smart about it, because I do think to Patrick's point about the endings and that being your ending, right? And like, you know, I think those also mean a lot as far as how people interpret the story of Life is Strange 1 thematically, because I always find it so fascinating talking to people who saved Chloe. Because for me, the whole time the game was building up the fact that Chloe needs to die for this like timeline and for Arcadia Bay and for everything to exist, because for me, Life is Strange 1 is a story about Max being unable to let go and unable to grieve, and her going back in time and letting things happen the way that the natural course should. Is her being able to finally be like, all right, I'm resolving this, like I'm finally letting go of Chloe, yada yada. But it's so fascinating talking to somebody else who made the opposite decision, because then thematically it becomes more so about like maybe perseverance and maybe about like, no, this is somebody that means something to me. It is about letting go of the past, which might be Arcadia Bay, and like, you know, doing what's best for me and Chloe, right? Like those are two completely different themes and two different stories that I think exist for people with Life is Strange 1, that like a follow-up to that in Double Exposure, I don't think can comment on both those things at the same time. So in a way, this story is almost destined to fail thematically, right? Because like for what they set up with the storm coming back, I felt like it had to be that again, right? Of like, all right, what did Chloe or what did Max learn from Life is Strange 1 about grief, about letting go, about changing the timeline, about trying to take things into your own hands a bit too much in ways that, you know, maybe shouldn't be. And they couldn't really do that all the way because they also have to cater to these people that like, you know, save Chloe, right? Like it's such an impossible thing to balance that.
Well, I kept waiting for in episode 5, like, well, at some point we're going to go back to Arcadia Bay, and the way they're going to use this power is a glimpse into the ending you didn't choose in the first game. Like that's going to be their way
that would have been fun.
of like commenting on it. It's like, how do we have our cake and eat it too? And it's like, well, we have a power that conveniently lets us peek into an alternate reality. Isn't that a way that we could do that for the player as a way of weaving? And you can imagine, you can scope it because it's just the end of the game. It's not the entire, you know what I mean? So I just feel they had the confidence to uncork like doing another Max story, but I don't think they fully resolved like what it means to do that, and ends up leaving the player feel pretty unsatisfied by the end.
That would make so much sense, because then you could have like the ending where you saved Arcadia Bay is the ending where Safi dies, because that thematically makes sense. So you wouldn't have to make 4 timelines and it'd be really gross, and then you're like, am I in the Chloe alive, Safi dead, Chloe living, Safi living, and all these combos. You could just be like, if you chose for Chloe to die, then you were in the game during the timeline where she.
And what if they could set up Safi dies, Chloe lives? You could just re-experience the choice all over again.
Yeah, like that would have been really interesting. And then whatever you pick is how the game starts. So maybe you realize that you have this time switching thing, and you time switch into the other timeline where she's dead already instead, right? And they just like flip flop the beginning. Then the rest of it could stay the same. Like the meat of it could be the same. That would
now we're making Starfield, right?
Yeah, like to do that and then also have it be like you don't even realize you're making the choice, because they do ask you at the beginning, like you're having a conversation with Safi and it is like, you know, oh, what happened or whatever, and you give kind of like this is what happened, right? Like Arcadia Bay lived, or you know, your Bay lived. That could have been like the stealthy way to put you in one of those timelines without you realizing.
And then you
Let's
just
become
go
game
through
designers.
a nice intro thing. And one could end with you and Safi chilling, and you realize you have this ability just because sparkles show up or something. Like, who really cares? And then the other choice would be what we played. And then she dies, and you go over to the real side. That would have been so cool.
Damn.
We got to get into the timeline where Deck 9 made this game.
Do you know
The way they were
I-
pitching it.
Do you know the way I thought this was going to go up until it was revealed that she was a shapeshifter was at the very start when she pulls her away from the chandelier when they're in that abandoned building. I thought Safi had Max's old power and saved her there when she should have been crushed by the chandelier.
Oh, that'd be fire.
And she was creating the storm. And then I thought maybe there'd be this cool thing where, like, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's like, oh, I stopped using my power. And, like, when you don't use your power, it goes on to somebody else or something. And, like, Safi inherited the power. And she was the one creating all these storms and all these problems. And then you got the time flippy go between the timeless power. And then the two of you were creating, like, a super mega double tornado storm. And then you realized later on that you each had powers. I was like, oh, that's definitely... Because it was just so suspicious the way she yanked her away from the chandelier. It was giving I should have died there. And I thought that was going to be the twist. And I called it hours ahead. And then the twist was, like, the opposite and way worse. I was like, damn it.
Damn.
Bang.
Well, I think we made some really good fan fiction here today.
This is
Yes.
great fan fiction.
Yeah, but I mean, all that to say, yeah, the ending was just really, really brutal. And I think, you know, we already talked about it a bit, but the post credits, like when credits hit, I was like, wow, this thing was not what I wanted it to be, and it was also just not good. And then when they did the black screen Max Caulfield will return, I think I literally started screaming at that point in the game.
What'd you yell? What'd you yell, Janet?
I think I yelled, no. You know, yeah. No, I was so moved negatively by the ending of this game that I just started messaging everybody I knew I was playing. I hit up Patrick, I hit up Greg, I hit up Blessing. I just started going around.
Anyone got it was my motivation to speed run through it. Was like, I gotta
Blessing
know.
was the only one that had finished it, and I was like, can I call you? And he's like, no, I'm watching the Penguin right now, but you could. I was like, damn. I'm like, so I just wrote an article instead because I'm like, I need to talk through this game. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's a lot of things we like technically didn't touch on, but they're kind of, I think one of the issues with this game is there's so many, there's a lot of little like subplots that just don't end up like mattering much in the main
Diamond having
story
a
that
crush
kind of
on
just goes
Moses?
into.
What was the point
Oh
of
my
that?
God, I loved reading that though.
It was
but
Vin
reading that,
as
I
a
was like, this is,
character? Why here?
Oh, he was so annoying. Why was he like
yes.
so she was so horny for him for some reason, even when I wasn't picking the be horny for Vin options. When they're
4
flirting on
times
the
in a row.
couch.
You sure you don't want to have sex with Vin? No, I was sure the
I'm
first time. I don't need to be
100%
asked a
But like,
fourth.
they set him up to fail. Like I feel like there must have been some level of them being maybe a little bit rushed with it or something, because like there was a moment where I started to turn and be like, I kind of like this Vin guy a little bit, and they're like, do you want to f him? And I'm like, no. No. Maybe if you gave me another chapter or two, like maybe, but I don't know. Like
I didn't like him either, but I did take the shot with him because I thought, you
Me
know
too,
what?
yes.
I took a shot with him.
And yeah.
took a shot with
But even
him.
then, he had to be like weird about it. He's like, "Be sexy, Max. Don't you want to be sexy?" And I'm like, I don't want to take the shot now, but
wanted
I'll
to
still
punch
just
him.
take it.
Ugh.
Yeah. No. So did anyone play? This is like getting into the weeds as we like, start to end here. But did anyone play Smash or Pass with him then? Because I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
I played.
Oh, I saw him. I kept walking.
Well, no. I mean, Smash or Pass is when they literally ask, do you want to f him? And I'm like,
Again, that's you missed an opportunity to say no again.
Yeah.
Damn.
He has 3. He's like Gwen, someone, and someone, and then he's like me, And I'm like, gross. You just wanted to ask me that. You made up a game to get there. But like,
I was like, write that down.
but Max is always like, maybe, even though I'm yelling no. They like animate her into being like, oh, I don't know.
oh,
She really
shucks.
wanted you to want him.
Yeah, then. I mean, the Smasher Pass game I thought was fun because, like, who does he ask you? He asks you about Lucas,
Gwen.
where I was like, oh man. For me as like a man for me as a straight man, I had to really think about it. And I ended up answering yes because I feel like Max would. I could see Max fucking like wanting to smash Lucas just because I don't know. He's a good looking man, right?
Yeah, but we know that do we know? Yeah, it's the end of
Really
the game.
thoughtful analysis there from Blessing. Thank you for taking us into your interiority there.
Just to put y'all in my head.
Garbage, though.
Yeah.
Just to put y'all in
I
my
mean,
head.
Max is kind of garbage, right? She might sit with,
That's true.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah, I mean-
he also asked about Reggie. I
It's the
believe.
beard, right? Is that what's doing it for you?
It's got to be
Is
the
it
beard.
the low
yeah.
poly beard?
It's the
that
beard,
looks
and
like
also
mud?
like it's the toxicity too. Like there's something
Yeah.
about toxic people, honestly. that
Did you
bring
love at
me
the
in.
end where you go up to talk to him and he's just like, go f yourself, Max Caulfield, and then you just have to walk away and be like, whoa, all
It's
right.
like, all right, fair.
I was like, honestly,
Oh,
respect
man.
him for that. Didn't think he was gonna say that.
I was ultimately pretty disappointed by the romance stuff in
Yeah.
the game. Like, even though the game, I feel like, tilts its hand with the bartender, like Amanda being like, of course, this is the character everyone's going to pick.
Yeah.
But you never get to go on a date with her. There doesn't need to be like a, you did it. You had
You
sex
didn't like
scene. I don't
closing
need-
your eyes and putting the headphones on?
Yeah,
No,
Thinking
that-
about
Oh,
I was gonna say that was the
a
date
little
for
more.
me.
my beef with that scene is it felt like they wanted to do, I guess spoilers for The Last of Us 2 now. They wanted to do the Last of Us 2 astronaut thing so bad and they
Yeah.
didn't. I was like, it didn't hit like that. Yeah, why is no one ever watching the bar? That should have been the red flag that was Safi as a doppelganger
Oh my
because
god, they go and make
she would-
out for a bit, and I'm like, someone's got to need to order a drink in the last 10 minutes that we're making out
Yeah.
on this couch.
Also,
right
for a second, when Safi was like, "Oh, I turned into Amanda," I was like, "Did I kiss Safi on that couch?" It took me a second to realize. Oh no, that was from like a different time. But yeah, I mean, I think this franchise tends to like the women romance ones are always like so much better. But this is probably the weakest man they've like dug out of a drawer in some time. Like he's actively.
It's almost a
like-
dare.
And it's like, I don't know, it's like a psychological speed. Because then also you find out that like he at one point hooked up with Safi. So it's like,
That
what
is
is going on?
weird.
This like,
Yeah.
it's like, but also like I
That
feel like
didn't go
you
anywhere,
can.
though.
Yeah, like it didn't. I even say like I chose a thing where I was like, oh, I know you hooked up with Safi, and he's like,
now. Okay.
yeah, I don't know how you found out
Like,
because
dang, you got
she
me
didn't
asked
tell
5
me.
questions. Like,
yeah. I think you even say like I looked at your phone, and he's like unbothered by it, but yeah.
all the Abraxas
Oh, man.
stuff, I thought they were gonna be nefarious or something.
Yes!
Yeah.
That was
Nothing
never-
happens with that.
I still don't understand what Abraxas is. Is it a club?
It's just a club, I think.
It's like a secret
a cult?
society. It's not a cult, but it's like one of those. Okay, it's like a frat for nerds.
Okay.
You know how like some frats have like a lot of requirements. It's like this one has like a more academic leaning, and it's like, oh, if you're part of Abraxas, your LinkedIn's gonna pop off when you graduate. If you're, like that's
Yuck.
kind of the vibe of Abraxas mixed with like a couple weirdo things. Like they have that puzzle box, which I also thought was gonna be more meaningful. Like I thought we were gonna do more
Is it
puzzles.
you only solve it once, right? And then it's
I
over?
never
Yeah.
figured it out again. Yeah.
I never saw it again.
Yeah. Do you take it out of your inventory or something? Did I mess
I
up?
don't think so. I
Okay.
don't think you did.
Ugh.
I think a couple other odds and ends for me. The clothes in this game were trash. And why do you have different clothes when you're inside and outside, like completely, like a
Like the
different coat?
beanies, Janet?
I
don't
just
like
didn't like
beanies?
the one part was always ugly. Like I
Yeah.
liked like the inside but not the outside, or like the outside but not the inside,
Did
and
you
they
like
were
the
all
Final
like patterned
Fantasy
in a weird way.
Because it's a Square Enix game.
I know. Oh my god.
There was some chapter where like some fucked up shit happened, and then like the chapter ended, and then it starts again, and I had to pick my outfit, and I accidentally picked an outfit that had like a bunch of like rainbow makeup and stuff, and like it's Max being all sad with rainbow makeup on, and I'm like, I don't like this. This is a mistake.
Oh my god. I thought the cat would also play a bigger role, which I think is only do you only get the cat if you have the deluxe edition?
It says extra cat
game?
content on the list of so I don't know if you just
No
get an
way.
extra cat.
I thought for
Because the cat
sure.
was texting you.
Yeah, the cat texts you. I forgot about that. He blocks you.
Which
That was a good bit. That was a good bit.
I actually like that part. But what I thought they were going to do with the cat was like, because I was reading all the social media stuff. I thought the social media stuff was generally like actually pretty well like constructed and gave me cool insights.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like reading, doom scrolling through that thing. And then at one point, the mom, Yasmin, of like the mom of Safi, was like, oh, for some reason I'm thinking about this cat that Safi used to have that would run up this tree. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the cat. We're going to get some like weird half in, half out cat content. And the cat did not matter at all. So just wanted
Can
to
you
throw that out
imagine
there.
that like the cat was actually Safi the whole time? She just shapeshifted.
Oh my
Wait,
god!
Just
that'd
sitting
be
on the fridge.
Cool. Maybe
Put it
she
in our
was,
comic
and they're not
that
going to
we're gonna
reveal
make
my
with
God.
all of our
years.
cool ideas for this game.
Oh my God.
Devs are like listening right now, like write that down, write that down.
Yeah. I guess just getting into a couple comments before we close out here. We have Salsa by the Sea, who I believe is also in the Twitch chat, so shout out to that, wrote in and said, I don't think I've ever been more this disappointed in a game. The last chapter is complete nonsense and the romance options are awful. By the end of the game, I barely know who Safi is, and the game failed to make me care about her. Overall, I think this game just upsets me because my Max learned not to mess with reality when I chose to save Arcadia Bay. Which I guess on that end, do you guys feel like in a way, this kind of goes back to what you brought up, maybe Blessing, but is this game kind of inherently a little doomed because like one of the big potential lessons is the don't use your powers, and Max talks about, no, Safi, you can't just power your way out of life. That's what I learned,
That's
but
like
also
every other Life is
power.
Strange too. Like
Yeah.
every game does that. That's like the underlying premise.
Yeah, so it kind of is backed into a corner, I think, in that way. We also have Villis, who wrote in and says, as someone who has always picked Chloe, I want to know more for sure, and it looks like we will know more. Safi is the superhero who just discovered powers and wants to use it for herself. Max is a person who has learned hard lessons from powers and is hesitant. The romance options are irrelevant, and I'm fine with that. This is the story I said I was at the beginning. Max kept looking to the past, which is why Chloe left. Now she's finally looking to the future. A Max who doesn't use powers has no story to tell. So I get again, just kind of leaning into that layer. And then the last one I want to touch on is Juniper, who wrote in and said, I've actually been pretty surprised by the general consensus reaction to the narrative. As someone who adored it, I connected to Max a lot in the original game, going through my own struggles, and I'm about the same age as her now. So seeing her grow up, dealing with feeling stuck in a repeated cycle of trauma really clicked with me. And I found the ending of her refusing to face another impossible choice genuinely moving. Critiques might well be in the right for the areas of plotting, but in terms of landing, for me, thematically and emotionally, it really struck a chord this year. So I wish I was there with you, Juniper, but I'm in a different timeline, kind of hanging out over here. So yeah, I'm in the dead world. Any other things you guys want to touch on before we close out about the game?
I think it was pretty messed up. She was willing to shoot her mom like that.
Okay, same. Like it was weird, right?
Something weird there. Yeah, I mean, like I get it. Like she would
had the
rather
mind goblin.
protect. Yeah, she'd rather protect Lucas than support her own daughter. Like messed up mom. Like shoot her. I was like, Safi's scary now.
Yeah.
That's when I was like, I don't want to finish this. This is getting to be too much.
And did
now.
shoot her. Like at the end of the game, she's like,
Yeah.
what's up? Calling from the hospital.
Yeah, and no matter what you choose, she shoots her. Also, I double checked. Like if you rush her, don't do anything. If you rush her,
Yeah.
she shoots her by mistake and then tries to blame you as if you were the one pointing the gun at her freaking mom. And if you do nothing, she just goes and shoots her anywhere in the same place. So what's the difference?
So, some of like the superpower tropes for me, like that one in particular of, oh man, she's all, chalked up on super, and so like she's going crazy, is about to shoot her mother. I'm like, man, I don't like this. And then also all of chapter 5, like the whole freaky wiki, we are walking through like weird that's happening, and like I understand that it is harkening back to chapter 5 of Life Strange 1, but also I didn't love chapter 5 of Life Strange 1. Like, I think after doing it once, I'm like, cool, that's enough. I don't need this to be how we're going to resolve stories from now on, because like, it's almost kind of like a cop out of, all right, how do we resolve things? We make weird. And like, I like having like natural resolutions to things sometimes. And so, yeah, didn't really love that out of chapter 5.
Yeah.
There were two small things. One, I like the fact that they resist the obvious temptation to make Safi a romance.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's like you made the good obvious decision, which is like that would be the cliche, and it's right in front of I kept waiting for that turn to happen at some point in the story. I'm really glad they resisted this, and mostly it's just what made the other romance stuff not being like particularly interesting, like more disappointing, because like I'm glad it's not here, but it doesn't feel like I got something nearly as compelling elsewhere from these side characters. And so like that was the like I really appreciated the fact that they kind of resisted that. The other was I've lost my other point. I had it. It'll come back to me.
I do want to put money down on in the next game. Chloe does come back. They do merge they explain it away from the merged timelines, and guess what? Chloe has superpowers now. Her nose be bleeding.
What's her superpower blessing? What is it?
Empathy. I don't know. Could you imagine Chloe?
She was into she can turn invisible. She was into like breaking into stuff and all that.
Oh yeah. It would have to be something that is.
I turn invisible, just like how I feel with my crummy dad.
Persuasion hands, because she's always talking. Remember, like you were saying, like her ability was to yap.
That was part of before the storm. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe she actually.
Yeah, she has like Jedi mind tricks.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think they probably bring Chloe back. Yeah. See, do I have like a toxic prediction?
I'm gonna hate it so much once they bring back.
Do you think
Chloe,
they meld all of the Life is Strange characters? Like we see like, was it Diego, like from Life is Strange 2? Like all of the people throughout.
What would Alex from Life is Strange True Colors do? You know what I mean? Like,
would be like, you're awful. Oh my god, this is horrible.
You got a shapeshifter. Awesome. You got somebody who controls time, and like Alex is sitting there like, oh man, they're sad over there. It's like, no.
Well, there's always like the whack superhero that can't really do as much, right? But like maybe secretly Alex is the most powerful one. That's like the trope for that, I think.
That's true.
Well, I think part of the issues going forward is the stakes are going to have to get so much higher. Like the way they're setting this up is like part of what Life is Strange. It's a time travel story, but about like this really like quaint, tiny relationship between these two characters. It's not about, I mean, yes, they're kind of, you get sort of end of the world-ish sort of vibes by the end, but it's part of, I think, what has made Life is Strange always work as a franchise is there's an element of the supernatural or the extraordinary, but about ordinary people in ordinary situations. And I'm just not that interested where this game gestures at where it's going, which is like, a collection of supervillains that we need to stop. How does that fit into this series, which has to be like for budget reasons in one location?
That's so true.
And choice based. Like
it's
not like if it was an action game, it'd be one thing. But yeah, to
what
Patrick's
if it became
point,
an action game?
Ugh. Please, God, no.
Nosebleeds everywhere as everyone's punching each other.
There's like
it's a hero shooter now.
You have a meter on the bottom left. That's your like nosebleed meter. And like the higher it is, the more powers you have. It's like just stamina. Honestly, I do hope that like the reaction to this game is enough to like have them go, actually, let's not pursue that. Let's just make another standalone like story with a character that Patrick described, right? You have weird powers. It's a quaint, small story about a murder in a town.
Give me the formula. The formula works.
The formula works. Like, I don't know if True Colors underperformed or something that made them want to like switch up, but like the formula works, man. The games have been good until now.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
I think if they want to lean into the whole superpowers thing is now this big world, but they're gonna have to tell us some of the rules, which I don't think they know. Yeah. Like they can't have all these cool things happening when we don't know what the limits are to them.
What's the storm? I didn't care what the storm was in the first. Like I wasn't thinking about it. Like rules don't have to be explained in a one-off, but once we're in like now we're at the stage where you have to start explaining what's going on, and I don't know that this world sustains that. And it didn't need to. I didn't care. But now you're making me have to care in order to like strain like the ability to like buy into this reality. And I think that's where it's going to start falling apart in some pretty obvious ways.
Yeah, I think that's also what sort of intensifies the weaknesses of this game. Like not only was the overarching like narrative such a flop for, you know, all of us and I think a lot of people, But then once that happens, you start to look around and, once you're in that kind of negative mindset, you start to look at everything else a little bit more negatively, where it's like, yeah, you know what? The romances weren't good. And we only went to like 3 places. Oh yeah, and what's with and suddenly it all just kind of falls apart, because like the closer you look at it, the blurrier the image kind of becomes. And I think when you're far enough from it, it looks pretty good. But it's like if you try to do your makeup, like don't come up too close. But 10 feet away, I look pretty good. It's not too bad. And I think it just kind of has like a hyper examination on y'all nailed it. Like what this is about. It's slice of life, and there happens to be a fun power that kind of amplifies information that you can gather or choices that you can make. And it, is the power fantasy is having more information to make choices. Because in life, you just have the information you get. And in Life is Strange, you can get extra information. But now that it's like all this like extra Safi sort of doing this to like get back at someone from something that happened this many years ago, and then it's like combining all these different aspects from the franchise. Definitely, they have a messy setup in front of them.
It feels too distracted, I think. And like, I think you just got to get that focus back, right? Like, I think to your point, right? Like, of these things kind of domino in terms of being able to put a magnifying glass up and start to see a bit more of its faults. Like, if this story was good from beginning to end, like I think there would be so much that we could forgive, right? Because then we look at it and we're like, oh, it's Life is Strange. Like, it's rough around the edges, maybe. Games. What was that, Patrick? Sorry, I missed it.
They're messy games. Like the storytelling is a mess in like every single one of these, but you forgive it because of the characters.
Yeah. Exactly, right? Like you just had to make anything that's like, I think, fun from beginning to end. And one of those things that I think helps it is the fact they've been so focused up until now. And this one just feels a bit distracted by trying to set things up and also trying to be a sequel and trying to like, set up different characters and balance them, right? And like, I think if you're able to get back to that focus, like I don't want to root against them whatsoever, right? Because like, listen, if you're gonna do a fucking X-Men style thing or some kind of team of supervillains, all power to you. If you're able to nail that, hey, I'll be in. Like if you're able to make that good, I'll be in. But I think inherently, right, that at its core feels like a way more distracted thing than typically what we get out of Life is Strange, which are small focused stories that you don't really have to think too hard about, to Patrick's point, right? You don't really have to explain things. You don't really have to get in your Duffy as far as like what's the lore here and all these things. I think they're setting themselves up for a very tough task, and we'll see. Like I'm scared for them.
And if you're also afraid, just we'll walk on down that dark hallway, like
I'm gonna play it. You can't stop me.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
I'm for sure gonna play it.
How many L's have to happen for you to say I'm out of the game? Because I feel like everyone here, 2.
If the next game is
do they
trash,
have to be consecutive?
Yes. If the next game is great and then the game after is trash again, like I'm still in.
Okay, so your number's 2. Everybody else,
I think
just ride or die, or
makes sense. And this is the first, so next one's gotta hit a bit better.
Well, we do got that other game. We got that other game coming though, right?
So from
it's like you want, yeah. Like, so
yeah.
So it's like you want if this doesn't work, I'm still holding out hope that what I wanted out of this might just come from a different set of characters in a different world, and it might still hit.
I think what's really frustrating in the fact that I am so negative on this is because it started so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good at the start. If it was just kind of meh and then had a pretty even more meh ending, we wouldn't be having this call and talking about it for 2 hours.
Yeah,
and
I don't think
comes from
we'd be mad
disappointment
about it.
Yeah, and it probably would have a 7, like from most people that played it. Like, not to put numbers on everything, but that's like the vibe. But like instead, it's like this is like a 5 to me. And some people are giving it 9s, which is interesting. Like, I always think games that are like that are way more interesting to talk about. So I'm like, why do you think it's a 9? Like, I want to hear that. And I think it's because it was so freaking strong. And then, like, nostalgia helps you forgive its sins a little bit near the end, because there is mirroring back to Life is Strange 1. But for me, it just, like, fumbled. But that end of chapter 2, like Janet, that gun picture was like, that's one of my favorite gaming moments of this year. I was gobsmacked. I was like, no way. And then Moses' immediate realistic reaction to it, like, I'm out of here, bye. Yep. I was like, we love a king who's watched horror movies and knows to get the hell out before shit hits the fan. You know what I mean? It was so promising. And I think that's why I now feel like I need to dunk on it almost, just because I'm like, you guys, I know you can do better than this because look how good you are. It was great.
It was really good.
Just what happened? Yeah.
The Safi reel was also fire on the lake, and it's like, so good. But yeah, it didn't stick the landing. As we close out, do y'all want to go around the horn? Do any plugs before we close this thing out?
You should plug your piece you wrote about it, which I have to read if it was fresh off of Janet frustrated with no one to talk to, brain.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Blessing didn't answer me, so I just booted up the CMS. So I was like, you know what? What else did I build a website for? But yeah, I have my article, Life is Strange, Double Exposures, Thrilling Plot Twists Take a Hard Pivot to Nowhere. Funnily enough, it is spoiler safe in those spoiler casts, so if you heard it, you already know, but it gets at a lot of my frustrations. And I also have my Best of 2024 list update too that y'all can check out. Hopefully I play more games to finish it. It is not on it, no. But, you know, watch out. I'll be coming for the next one, too. So we'll see how it goes. Anyone else?
Yeah, you can. You can listen to me chatting with Janet, every week over at Remap Radio. And then I also I run a newsletter called Crossplay, which is about parenting and gaming and all the sorts of challenges and things of that nature that come up in a world where kids at very young ages are playing games and on iPads and things like that. So you can sign up for that at crossplay.news.
Nice.
Hell yeah. You can
Everyone
follow
else
me.
has to go.
YouTube.com/kindafunny is where I make kind of funny games, is where I make a bunch of content with kind of funny games daily, gamescast, all that stuff. I also stream sometimes twitch.tv/Blessing Jr. But if you want to follow me on social, Blessing Jr. on all platforms, including Blue Sky.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm Haley Fax, also much more trying to be on Blue Sky lately. So follow me there.
I moved that icon.
Yeah,
I moved that icon, all thanks to Blessing's encouragement.
It's literally, my brain chemistry is so much better doom scrolling that than Twitter. I just need to switch.
Hell yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we're out.
Did you know that you can double the amount of MinnMax podcasts you listen to every single week right in your favorite podcast app? All you have to do is go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, jump in at that $5 tier, and then you're good to go. You have the podcast version of The Deepest Dive, Max Spoilers, MinnMax Interviews, weekly access to Bonus Pod, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast. It's very good. And early and ad-free versions of the MinnMax Show podcast every single week. There's a ton of content in there, and it's a way to directly support what we do here at MinnMax.